The British military has if you will, an acronym that they refer to as the 7 Ps. The 7 Ps, are kind of an idea to draw attention to an idea that they wish to present um, in the form of training. The 7 Ps are often overlooked, I think, to a degree by many people, although they are transferred across the field into many different disciplines. 7 Ps, of course, stand for prior proper planning prevents piss poor performance. According to Wikipedia, it says when it is explained, the humor and the shock of a mild expletive help make an adage memorial. In other words, kind of, I guess, what they're saying is shock value makes it stick to your head. It's often used in project planning, or in the case of the military, in training with life and death decisions. The Boy Scouts of America had another statement where they always said, always prepared, always be prepared, right? And the idea behind both of them, I think, just is that there needs to be some sort of a guideline, if you will, that says, hey, we are ready for the circumstances, whatever those circumstances may be. And so when we look at that, I want to look at the passage this morning that deals with kind of about that, talking about the Lord's work, always being prepared, always being ready, and always remembering what God has done. Remember to be prepared and ready is another way to put it. So it's actually found in the book of Exodus chapter 12. And I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's a long portion there. And we'll just kind of pick through a few of the verses here. So if you will, you can turn with me to Exodus chapter 12. We'll read the first 9 verses. We talk about being prepared for the Lord's work. Exodus 12, verse 1. And it reads, "The Lord said to Moses and Aaron in Egypt, 'This month is to be for you the first month of your year. Tell the whole community of Israel that on the 10th day of this month, each man is to take a lamb for his family, one for each household. If any household is too small for a whole lamb, they must share one with their nearest neighbor, having taken into account the number of people there are. You are to determine the amount of lamb needed in accordance with what each person will eat. The animals you choose must be year-old males without defect, and you may take them from the sheep or the goats. Take care of them until the 14th day of the month, when all the people of the community of Israel must slaughter them at twilight. Then they are to take some of the blood and put it on the sides of the tops of door frames of the houses where they eat the lambs. That same night they are to eat the meat roasted over the fire along with bitter herbs and bread made without yeast. Do not eat the meat raw or cooked in water, but roasted over the fire, head, legs, and inner parts.'" I'll stop right there and just kind of talk about this being prepared, that idea that we find throughout everywhere, actually. And it's a good idea to do it. There's a joke, I guess you could say. It says, how did Moses prepare his tea? He brews it. I know, he brews it. What we have here is we want to talk about the preparation that we see God giving the instruction to Israel at this point. And you got to understand, they're leading up to the 10th plague. The previous 9 plagues have happened in Egypt, where they've all been serious and deadly, and now up to this point where the Egyptians' firstborn on the 10th plague will die. And that'll happen later in the chapter. But right now what we see is the preparation leading up to that. And so we have to understand what God's trying to tell Moses here is to be prepared for the Lord's work. So what kind of preparation do we see God telling Moses here? Well, first of all, preparation is time sensitive. It's the first principle we have. Preparation here is time sensitive. Take a look at this. He says this month must be for the first month of your year, and then on the 10th day each man is to take a family, and then on the 14th day of the month when the people of Israel must slaughter them at twilight. I mean, there are details there. The first month of the first year, right? And then on the 10th day, you're supposed to take a lamb out of the flock. And then on the 14th day, you're supposed to kill it at twilight. And then you take the blood and you put it on the posts, right? And you can't, it even tells you how to deal with some of the leftovers, later on. We'll find in this chapter, verse 10, where it actually talks about, do not leave any until morning. If some is left, you must burn it. Very interesting, the details and the time necessary, right? The instructions that God gives are very explicit and very straightforward. Preparation for the work of the Lord needs to follow God's instructions. That's the first thing we can always take out of this, is that preparation and the work of the Lord must always follow God's instructions. These are not haphazard. These are not random things that just happen, but rather it's illogical. Rather it's organized. Rather it is done in a way that makes sense. I guess that's the best way to put it. And take note that this preparation is not just for the priestly class or for someone else. It's for everybody. In fact, it talks about the whole family. It says households. It mentions each man is to take the lamb for his family. We're talking inclusion for everyone. Oftentimes, I often wonder if we don't think that perhaps the instructions found in the Bible are mainly for the religious class or the priestly class or the pastors today, and we say they really don't apply to us. According to the Bible, I see what God's saying here is that this is inclusion. The instructions for being ready for God's work include everyone, every household, every person is going to partake in this, and it should be ready in the preparation to it. And just take a look at the details that we have here. That are just there. Everyone has a detail, and it's really interesting. The households, whether or not they're too large or too small, we see if they're too poor or if they're, too big. These things are all there. And it also talks about leftovers. What do you do with the leftovers? In verse 10, it says to burn them. Very interesting. The bread, you're supposed to eat unleavened bread. They don't want anything going. So we have preparation details. We have things that God is doing. Preparation for the Lord's work should be detailed. It should be. You shouldn't just go haphazard. I know a lot of people say, if it's the Lord's will, I'll do such and such. And it's like, really? I don't think so. Well, God's given you a brain. God expects you to use it. Make those preparations. If God doesn't want those preparations done, He will tell you. It's just that simple. Preparation for the Lord's work, something we all have to do. The question that we can ask ourselves is just how prepared are you and I for God's work? What God might be asking us to do. And I don't know what that is. Maybe He's asking you to go overseas on a long mission. Are you preparing for that? Are you ready for that? Maybe He's telling you, to help your neighbor next week. Have you made adequate plans to do that? Maybe He's telling you it's time to fix up your own yard. Have you made plans to do that? Are you prepared for that? How are you preparing? The work of the Lord, or whatever He may be telling you to do, how am I handling the preparation for that? There's the question. Do we feel prepared? If we don't, well, we need to fix that. We really need to fix that. It's very interesting, actually, that we find God doesn't necessarily give us direct details in terms of when He's coming back. Instead, He gives us this command to be prepared. Be prepared, right? For the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night. And while people are saying peace and safety, destruction will come upon them suddenly. 1 Thessalonians 5. What does that mean? Be ready, because God may return. God may call you. God may put you in a situation where He expects you to work. And He may call you right now. Be prepared for the Lord's work. Second principle we can look at in this passage here in chapter 12 is to be ready. Be ready for the Lord. Now you're going to look at me and go, wait a minute. I am prepared. What's the difference between readiness and preparedness? I'm glad you asked that. Webster's defines being prepared as mentally or physically for some experience or action. In other words, being ready is being prepared mentally. So there's a physical aspect, which is being prepared. Like you're gathering up all the stuff you're going to need for your work in the Lord. But now you also got to put yourself in that mental capacity. That one that says, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is where my head is. I'm putting my head in the game, essentially. So we be ready. How do we be ready? Well, first one is we are very conscious in the decisions that we make. Okay, in verse 11, take a look at what happens here. It says, "This is how you are to eat it." God tells Moses, "With your cloak tucked into your belt, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand, eat in haste. It is the Lord's Passover." Okay, very explicit instructions here. You have to be ready to run. Essentially, the cloak tucked in, the sandals on your feet, and the staff in your hand. Okay, that means you're ready to go. You're ready to go. We have to live in that expectation that God is at work in this world, that something that God is doing is going to happen soon, and it's active. So, our election season's coming up again. Indeed, it is. You ready for that? Are we ready for that? There's the question to ask. Because we're going to be required to act. We will. We'll have to go to work. We'll have to continue living our lives, whatever we may be, in whichever political candidate we support. Right? We have to pick up our life and keep moving. Are we ready? Have we made that mental decision that we're going to be okay? Have we made that idea that God is at work in this world and we're just going to live with it? Live in the expectation that God's going to take care of you, regardless of the situation. If you think about it, this is an act of faith. Being ready. The calmness despite the circumstances that surround you. The reality that says, come what may, God's in control. That's a testimony. That's what people see. That's what people understand about your life, is that you're not worried by things because God's in control. Are you ready? Are you living with the expectation that God is at work in this land, that God's going to save his people? There's the question. Because I can tell you how someone will find that out. On down in verse 28, where it says the Israelites did just what the Lord commanded Moses and Aaron. You see, obedience shows your faith. Obedience to God's word shows your faith. Pretty simple and straightforward. Obedience shows your faith. It's just that simple. It's our testimony. Trusting in God in this situation, living our life and being ready, despite the circumstances that may come. That's a demonstration of our faith, and that is what we are called to do. We are not only to be prepared, and we're to be ready mentally, but God also put something else in place here in this part of the chapter 12, and it's the idea of a festival. It causes us to remember these two things. See, it does us no good to be prepared one time, to be ready one time, and then when that time comes and goes, we tend to forget about it. It does us no good. But here God is instituting something that causes a memory to keep happening over and over and over again. Remember, in the first part of this chapter here, it talks about the first month on the 10th day. So suddenly we have this idea that it's going to occur on an annual basis. So everyone's going to know. The whole point of the Passover feast. You see, and we read on, it says, verse 14, it says, "This is a day you are to commemorate. For generations to come you shall celebrate it as a festival to the Lord, a lasting ordinance. For 7 days you are to eat bread made without yeast. On the first day remove the yeast from your house. Whoever eats anything with yeast in it on the first day through the 7th must be cut off from Israel. On the first day hold a sacred assembly. Another one is on the 7th. Do no work at all on these days except to prepare food for everyone to eat, because that is all you may do. Celebrate the feast of unleavened bread, because it is on this very day that I brought your divisions out of Egypt. Celebrate this day as a lasting ordinance for generations to come. In the first month you are to eat bread made without yeast, from evening on the 14th day until the evening of the 21st day. For 7 days no yeast is to be found in your houses, and whoever eats anything with yeast in it must be cut off the community of Israel, whether he is alien or native born. Eat nothing made with yeast. Wherever you live, you must eat unleavened bread. So we're talking about this feast of unleavened bread that God is instituting so that people can remember that they need to be prepared for the Lord's work, that they need to be ready for it, because this talks about when God took them out of Egypt, right? They had to be ready. Remember, when they had to eat the Passover lamb, they literally had to eat it with, sandals on, staff in hand, cloak tucked in, ready to go at a moment's notice. It's an idea of remembrance, an idea that we do. And quite frankly, I guess the question we can ask ourselves is, what are we doing to cause us to remember, to be ready, to be prepared? What are we doing? We don't have the feast necessarily. Sure, some of us go to church on Sunday and get encouraged and continue doing things, but really that's not really causing us to remember these things. How often do we just say, yeah, okay, I'll work for the Lord, I'll do something for the Lord, and then we just turn around and walk away? We don't do anything about it because we've totally slipped our mind. We got jobs, we got families, we got recreation, we got things that just happen. How often do we stop to remember that we need to be ready, that we need to be prepared? There's a question that's applicable to a lot of us. We're just not doing a whole lot. And it's very interesting how this thing works. It's not just, aimed at us current generation or the current people, but God wants to pass it on. It's a generation to come, it says here. In verse 24, obey these instructions as a lasting ordinance for you and your descendants. In other words, you're supposed to pass this on to a future generation so that they may know what God has done. You see, you celebrate these feasts and you celebrate this thing, and you're prepared and you're ready, and you do this every year so that they may know what God has done. It's a testimony to your faith, once again. Just the fundamental reality of following these instructions so that you are called to remember what God has done and called to be ready and be prepared. Proper response in everything when we remember what God has done for us is worship. Take a look at the tail end of verse 27 there, where it says, then the people bowed down and worshiped. When we look back and we see what God has done in our lives, we look forward, being prepared and ready to do the work of the Lord. The proper response is always to worship God. And that's what they've done. That's what the Israelites did. Verse 28, the Israelites did just what the Lord commanded Moses and Aaron. So as we look at this, the lessons we can learn out of this little passage here is fundamentally just simple. Remember to be prepared and ready. To be prepared and to be ready. Because the work of the Lord is something that can happen right now. God may call us to a certain situation that we're totally unprepared for. And then what do we feel like? It's not a real good, pleasant feeling when someone asks you a question and you're not ready to answer it. When someone needs help and you can't give it. Be prepared, be ready, and remember those two things. That's what the lesson in this morning is. Our lives should always reflect this, that we're always prepared, we're always ready, and we're always remembering those two things. Remember to be prepared and ready. I'd say it's a new acronym, similar to the 7 P's. It's RPR, remember, preparedness, and readiness. By remembering this, we accomplish, I think, what the 7 P's actually attempt to do. It prepares us for a serious struggle. What is that struggle? That's our daily walk. That's our life. It's what we go through. So if remembering to be prepared and to be ready help us in our walk, then that is what we should do.